domestic violence shelters in the short term, but then after a certain amount of time also return to the county tax roll and again be income earning properties for the county. Additionally, we have a work group that's working with the Gospel Rescue Mission. The Gospel Rescue Mission is our only homeless shelter in the city of McMinnville. They are currently working to expand their work into more transitional housing, as they've had a lot of experience with individuals coming in, receiving job training, if applicable, the opportunity to get sober or have the support they need in that way, and then have been unable to find additional housing. So the Gospel Rescue Mission has turned its eye towards acquiring more property and to set up additional transitional housing. They are also working with the county. In addition, we heard a report on Housing Solutions, which is a new group that has been set up by Commissioner Kula. It is county-wide and meeting regularly. At this phase, they're working to understand what's happening in the individual communities, as we understand that McMinnville is not unique in its experiences with homelessness at this time. This West Valley is experiencing homelessness. Newburgh is experiencing homelessness in large numbers as well. And so that group currently is seeking some structure and some guidance, but they're trying to pull in all of the right partners to be able to take a more proactive approach and stop some redundancy that's happening city to city, so that McMinnville is not trying to recreate what Newburgh is doing and vice versa. We also had a conversation about trying to create some sort of lead for housing solutions, similar to what was created through the COG with the Mid-Willamette Housing Solutions. And this would be a paid position, somebody that understood all of the resources that are available in our many communities, again, in the attempt to stop some redundancy that's happening. Additionally, YCAP is currently leading a group of shelter providers, also trying to understand better that redundancy that's happening so we can more quickly get people into housing. I previously reported on a Synergy Summit that was held by the Housing Authority of Yamhill County, and we did have a report back from Henderson House that one result of that Synergy Summit was that some of these smaller nonprofits that are also focused on housing have been available or have been made aware of housing opportunities that they weren't currently aware of. Specifically, Henderson House was given 25 fast-track housing vouchers by the Housing Authority. And so therefore we're able to move those victims of domestic violence from emergency housing to housing. So that's one committee that I'm reporting on. The other committee that I have to report on is the McMinnville Affordable Housing Task Force. So we held our meeting on March 27th, pardon me. And our first order of business was to first review our action plan, and forgive me 1 second. There are some points that I wanted to not miss. So on that, thank you. So in the review of that action plan, of course, we noted some of the work that we had accomplished to date, which included memorializing system development charge discounts for affordable housing projects, reviewing recently adopted inclusionary zoning laws, which I'll have some more on that in a moment, offering an expedited permit process to builders who are offering affordable housing, researching and revising our cottage codes, and preparing language that's been adopted by this council to expand opportunities for affordable housing. We have some ongoing projects as well, including surveying the city for property opportunities, whether those are city-owned, county-owned, or nonprofit-owned. The work we're about to endeavor on includes evaluating the impact of a density bonus for developers. We've also done a buildable lands inventory, a housing needs assessment, and are beginning a housing needs strategy. Another one of our action items was to look at neighborhood stabilization, and we've correlated that with some of the work that's been done through moving code enforcement from the police department to the planning department and helping to bring a number of properties up to code that formerly weren't. In addition, we have been meeting with the development community to evaluate a construction excise tax. These are methods of potentially creating more funding methods for housing in our city. We are evaluating the possibility of a floating zone, the end goal of which would be to be able to provide interim housing in an area that wouldn't normally be zoned for housing. So we have a work group working on that and evaluating that, which will eventually come before the council. And then we're keeping our eyes on a number of things that are happening at the state level. Sal most definitely would be able to speak better to these than I am, but as a small overview, we are watching House Bill 2997, which was really written by the McMinnville Planning Department, especially our planning director, Heather Richards, and our senior planner, Tom Schauer, and Sal Peralta. And Sal testified to that as...
I'll talk about it.
Oh, okay, detail, so, wonderful. Yeah. So there's more to come on that. We're also watching House Bill 2001, and our planning department has suggested amendments. This would help us to create equity and inclusion in our neighborhoods. We're following House Bill 2055, which is focused as a workforce housing accelerator program. And those monies would come via Oregon Housing and Community Services to assist local governments. We're also following House Bill 2056, which is a housing development grant program. We were engaged with Senate Bill 595, which on the Oregon website says it's still in committee, but I hear is really no longer.
I'll talk about that one as well.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Sal. We're following Senate Bill 10, which relates to density requirements, and we're following House Bill 3349, which would redirect monies. It would do away with mortgage interest deductions on second homes and make those funds available for affordable housing. That might be it for today.
Thank you, Remy. We've given Remy a little extra time to report because of the focus on homelessness and housing this evening. We thought that that would be a great update for those that are in the audience. So we'll move down to Zach. Do you have any reporting on committee assignments?
Nothing of note from Historic Landmarks or McMinnville Community Media, and the only thing to note on Landscape Review is Arbor Day is this Saturday at the McMinnville High School. We'll be celebrating with trees and plantings at McMinnville High School, Saturday, April 13th, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m.
Thank you, Zach. Wendy.
The McMinnville Urban Renewal Advisory Committee canceled its meeting this month because we are continuing work on the 3rd Street Improvement Project. We had our second meeting and we focused on high-level goals. We had a good group that came out and we did some good brainstorming, and they're going to go back and put it together for us, and we'll probably have some high-level goals for that project at our next meeting.
Thank you, Wendy. Adam?
We have a YCOM meeting on Thursday. Looks like House Bill 2449, which is a 911 tax bill, is still alive. It's going to go from 75 cents to $1.50 on your phone bills per line. And Airport Commission, we haven't met. Still refurbing that fuel tank out there for the no-lead. And we have our first Kids on the Block Advisory Committee meeting tomorrow at 3:30 with Zach.
Thank you, Adam. Sal?
My two committees are the Parkway Committee, which didn't meet, and Mid-Valley Council of Governments, which also didn't meet. However, I have been working, as Remy mentioned, on some legislation for the city, and it's germane to today's meeting, so I just thought I'd mention it. The first bill that I've been working on is House Bill 2997, which is a bill that we had intended to make changes to the state's inclusionary zoning law that were intended to make it more usable for smaller communities. This is intended to bring more affordable housing projects into cities like ours. The legislation is moving forward. It's not going to be a statewide ordinance, but they will be moving forward with McMinnville as a pilot case for it. It passed out of committee yesterday on a 7-1 vote, and we're expecting it to pass in the House before moving on to the Senate. Feel good about that bill. And thank you to Heather and her staff, Tom and others, for their work on that. Second bill is Senate Bill 595. I just want to correct some of the comments that have been made in previous meetings. That bill is moving forward. It's met the legislative deadlines to move out of the Senate Housing Committee and into the Senate Finance Committee. This is a bill that would allow local governments to reallocate a portion of our transient lodging tax to address the housing affordability and homelessness crisis. It's not a tax increase, it's just a reallocation. The Affordable Housing Subcommittee voted to support that bill and had suggested that the full council take action on it. I think because of some bad reporting about the bill, that didn't happen at either of the last two meetings, and so I would like for that to be considered this evening. I've made that request of staff as well. I think it's important that our city weigh in on that, and so that I can do the work that I need to try and keep that moving forward. Third point I wanted to just raise for this evening. As some of the staff knows, because of my role on the COG, I've been contacting other jurisdictions to see how they're working in their communities to address homelessness, particularly with regard to the enforcement side of it in light of the Ninth Circuit decision. In making those calls, you know, it's just worth mentioning, we're not alone in what's happening. In 2018, Oregon had the second largest population of unsheltered homelessness in the country. Rural Oregon at that time had the second largest homeless population of any rural region in the country. And that problem grew in 2000. It's grown in the last year. We were the second, 2 years ago, we were the fourth fastest growing homeless state in the country. Last year, we were the second fastest, or 3 years ago, the fourth fastest, 2 years ago, the second fastest, this year, the fastest. We're dealing with a crisis. It's affecting the entire state. It's very frustrating for all of us. Anyway, that said, I had a productive conversation with the mayor of Corvallis, and he pointed out that their city code mayor differentiates between sleeping and camping, and they place time and place restrictions on camping. And I've asked our staff to look into that as a possibility for strengthening our enforcement against long-term camping, particularly in the city core. And I guess I was hoping to get a bit of an update from staff about how those conversations have gone tonight.
Mayor, council, and members of the public, I can briefly report, Police Chief Scales is actually out of town at a conference, but he met with the Corvallis chief today, got some feedback from them on how that ordinance has been working in their community. Legal counsel is also in the process of reviewing the information we've gathered from Corvallis. We'll have more soon.
Thank you. That's all I had, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Sal. Kelly?
Well, I've been vacationing, but I'm on the Housing Committee with Remy, but in addition, I'm also on the Visit McMinnville Committee, and we are meeting for our strategic plan that's been postponed a couple of times tomorrow. And in addition to that, I'll probably be going and listening at the state legislature as we testify, or the mayor and others testify for the Parkway Committee, which I'm very enthusiastic about. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Kelly. And just again, tomorrow, we're going to be the Parkway Committee will be spending the day in Salem visiting senators and House of Representative members. And then at 5 o'clock, we will be joining the Joint Committee on Transportation and testifying as a Parkway Committee. And again, our intent is to seek more funding to what we call phase to the finish, the Parkway. And we'd had an opportunity to go back to Washington, D.C. and doing some legislative work with our senators and representatives back in Washington, D.C., and also meeting with the Federal Highway and Transportation Committees back there. So those are the things I've been involved in. Remy talked about the county housing solution meeting, and so that takes care of our reports this evening. Again, it's out of order, but we thought that it would be appropriate just to share with you some of the areas that we're focusing on. With that being said, we're going to move right now. We have one proclamation tonight, and I'd like to address the proclamation. And so I'm going to read this proclamation, and then we'll have the opportunity to have Russell come up and I'll present it to him. But our proclamation is, whereas children abuse is considered to be one of our nation's most serious public health problems, with scientific studies documenting the link between the abuse and neglect of children and a wide range of medical, emotional, psychological, and behavioral disorders. And whereas it is estimated that 1 in 4 children will suffer significant abuse before the age of 18, and annually over 80,000 Oregonian children are reported to the Department of Human Services as having been abused or neglected, with over 10,000 child abuse victims confirmed in 2018 alone. And whereas a physical, emotional, financial impact of abuse and neglect falls mostly heavily on children of all ages and abilities who come from all economic, racial, social backgrounds, and these crimes affect many more family members, friends, neighbors, and coworkers. And whereas a trauma-informed response to victims promote healing and foster strength in their survivors, and whereas children victims who feel understood and supported are more likely to disclose their victimization, seeking services to find healing and participating in the justice process, and whereas providing victims and their families with knowledge of their rights and available services further strengthens their ability to recover by restoring a sense of self-empowerment, and whereas effective child abuse prevention programs succeeded because of partnerships created among state and local government agencies, schools, faith communities, civic organizations, law enforcement agencies, and the business community. And whereas McMinnville is dedicated to strengthening child abuse survivors and their non-offending families in the aftermath of crime, building resilience in our community and working to prevent abuse and neglect. Now, therefore, I, Scott A. Hill, Mayor of the City of McMinnville, do hereby proclaim April 2019 as National Child Abuse Prevention Month. In witness thereof, I have therefore set my hand and caused the official seal of the City of McMinnville to be affixed the 9th day of April 2019. We affirm McMinnville's commitment to creating a safer, healthier, more thriving community for our children and taking steps to help prevent child abuse through awareness efforts, prevention, promotion, and training. Further, we call upon all citizens to invest in the lives of our children, to be aware of their safety, well-being, and celebrate those who provide prevention programs and support to child victims of violence, sexual abuse, and neglect, and many other life altering crimes, and their commitment to ensuring that all children are afforded their rights to be safe from harm. As well, we promote the psychological, physical, emotional, healing, and ongoing development of these most precious resources, our children. Further, we ask and encourage all citizens to wear blue tomorrow, April 10th, 2019, as a public statement of support of child abuse prevention. Signed, Scott A. Hill, Mayor of the City of McMinnville. Russell?
I just want to say how grateful I am to the city of McMinnville, the agencies, the city, councilors, thank you so much. The support that we're seeing throughout the county this year in prevention, making public statements about prevention of child abuse is so heartening. As you can imagine, this is difficult work, but the reality is that the link between untreated child abuse and many of the social issues that we're facing is huge. And we know that we can prevent child abuse. But the primary thing that makes it happen is a citizenry that is motivated, that is trained, that is willing to take action and stand up and say, we will not tolerate child abuse or neglect in our community. And we are doing that this month throughout the county, and particularly here in McMinnville. Thank you all so much for being here and for supporting this work, and for all the work that our many agencies in this community work in collaboration with GBA's House to save and protect our children. Thank you.
One of the most pleasurable things I have the opportunity of doing is proclamations, and this was a really a good organization and good recognition. So, Russell, thank you. This now takes us to our part in the program this evening, comments from citizens. And any member of the audience is invited to provide comments. Anyone may speak on any topic other than a matter that is in litigation, a quasi-judicial land use matter, or a matter scheduled for a public hearing at some future date. We limit our comments to 3 minutes, and I'll raise my hand, and I could, especially tonight, interrupt you because we're going to hold to the 3 minute. It is a dialogue of you sharing with the council, so we will not get into a dialogue back and forth, but sharing your comments. We know there have been many comments that have been given to us electronically that will be a part of the record this evening as they've come in, and so I'm going to go ahead and if you have a desire to speak, fill one of these out and give it to Melissa. But I'll go ahead and start with it looks like Michael Yates.
Michael Yates.
Go ahead, Michael. Come in. We have all your information, so you don't have to identify your address in that.
Good evening, council. There's an important
Pull the mic a little closer to you, Michael, so everyone can hear.
There's an important issue that I'd like to bring up because I've lived here for several years and I've been trying to be a decent member of the community, but I am in transition, and because of some of the things that they're involved with being on the streets, I'm not allowed to stay at the homeless shelter or anything, and I've been incarcerated because of desperation, but I was not allowed to receive the medical treatment that I needed, and I was kicked out of jail. And there was times I went to jail just try to get a safe place to stay out of the weather, but I was denied that. And then they want me to go to jail when everything's coming better. But I mean, there's a real issue that's going on. Like, the IRS is saying that my tax returns are supposed to be at the mission, and it's supposed to have been there for a while, and I got arrested several weeks ago for protesting it, you know, and it's ruining my name. I'm trying to move forward with my life, but I mean, I don't know who to believe. The IRS or the mission. But I mean, for me to be going to jail and facing charges over this, it deeply concerns me, you know. And I have nothing against the people at the mission. I just it's important because, like, if I were to move back out east, I could have a place to live, but I need the funds and everything. I was not given no choice about it. When I did the W-2s, it was the address, and they gave me no choice. And I just wish that I can't become a statistic for the system, you know. I've invested too much time. I've been roughed up and everything, and it's, I don't know. People already know what's going on, and I just wanted to share my part of the story. I don't want to make anybody look bad over the situation, but it's really stressing me out. It's killing my family. My family's involved in politics, and my dad's a retired law enforcement officer on the East Coast, and it's killing him to hear about things like this. His health isn't good, and every time I get the chance to move out there.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate you sharing that with us. Robert Wood. Robert Wood. Jacob Miller. Welcome, Jacob.
Good evening. Oh, I just came down, like to share.
Bring the mic closer.
Yes, sir.
if you
Yes,
would,
sir.
So they can hear.
Can you guys hear me now? I just came down, I'd like to, well, thank you guys for some of the work that you have been doing on stuff. I didn't hear anything up until now about some of the stuff that you guys have been doing, so that's good to hear. And really just to address some of the well, I'll just get to the point. I'd like to point out that discrimination based on economic status is no better than discrimination based on race, age, sex, religion, or belief. And I urge you guys, I really do urge you guys to count the costs of further ordinances designed to be arbitrarily enforced and applied discriminately towards the most vulnerable of people, those deemed undesirable in a lot of the cases. I think that really, if as much effort is put into, like, the situation of trash, if people even put forth the effort that my family's put forth to try to get cleaned up within the community, it wouldn't be there. It wouldn't be there. There's people that are there that are capable and they're trying, but there's people that aren't. And I think there's other capable members of this community that might be able to help out on that as well. We can't actually have a dumpster put down there on our call. It's your guys' call. You guys have to okay it. You have to permit it. We had one down there that was sanctioned, was filled in 24 hours, all the way to the top. I mean, there are people that will come out and help, but we could really use more of the help. Moving forward with that, I think we should, that it clearly, these ordinances that are designed to oppress more than actually alleviate the issue. If the issue is sanitation, like calling an emergency due to sanitation issues, due to health issues, but then not providing the things for sanitation, like trash cans and toilets, it's not a viable approach. And I really, I think it cuts down at an admissible relationship between the groups that are affected by this. I know that it looks bad, and I know that it's getting big, and it's concerning us. We've been trying to hold the line, but our little trailer just doesn't hold all the trash. Stuff like that is really simple. It seems like a really big thing, but really less hate and scared tactic and more love and charity. Just what could one do? Not necessarily give people stuff. Maybe even just coming down and at the back of a truck, on a scheduled day. Some people might be able to help. Some people might not. Just more of that love is what I'm getting at. What I'm cutting at. I think that would really go a lot farther than hate. And I urge you again to count the cost. Remember that there already was an emergency declared. There's already stuff passed. We've already seen the manipulation of rules along the way, and even hearing of more manipulation of the rules to keep people moving along, but not anything to solve the problems. Problems like sanitation, problems like the health, the smell, things that are bothering people, things that they're otherwise would rather not look at. Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacob. Howie Harkema? How are you, Howie?
Very good.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councilors, for all you do. Thank you, staff. I've been involved in this homeless issue now for 12 years. About 5.5 years ago, Mark Davis and I came and gave comments on the homeless influx and the homeless crisis that was coming to McMinnville and throughout Yamhill County. Our testimonies were given to both this council and the Board of Commissioners at the time. The crisis has arrived, and it's here right now, right in front of us. In 2008, during the annual homeless count, we found 364 homeless people living in Yamhill County. In 2018, 1,386 were counted in the Yamhill County homeless count, with the largest homeless population living in McMinnville. I certainly can understand the resistance and problems that we're having on the streets with our visibly homeless population camping downtown on the streets of McMinnville, and I can and do sympathize and empathize with this community and our businesses. The amount of trash, garbage, and physical residue piling up every day, the not having restrooms available for those that need them forces our homeless to utilize alleyways, parking lots, behind buildings to relieve themselves of their bodily functions, which we all must do because they have no alternative. This in turn affects the businesses, our tourism, and our community at large. But these people living on these public spaces have no local homeless camp available to them, nor do they have, beyond the mission, a shelter available where they feel comfortable, except in the fall and the winter when they open the emergency winter shelter. These human beings live a lifestyle different from us. They cannot afford to be anywhere else. These few visible homeless, 70 or less, are survivalists. They are the ones that we see on the streets, not the invisible homeless. Some of them have mental health issues, drug and alcohol addiction issues, and other personal broad brush problems that keep them where they are without social intervention. I, for one, believe that we must continue to seek answers and probably some very uncomfortable solutions. This problem here right in front of us is not going to go away anytime soon. Every state, county, and city in the U.S. is dealing with this complicated issue. However, there are solutions, as we have looked at Eugene, Springfield, and what they do down there, but we also need to look at Salt Lake City, New Jersey, and others across the nation that have at least found some important solutions like housing first, rapid rehousing.
Howie, we've
Yes.
hit our 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you for your testimony, though,
thank
and
you.
all the good work you're doing.
Thank you all.
Valerie Miller? Hi, Valerie.
Hi,
Good to see you.
it's good to see you guys. First of all, I want to congratulate all of you on the work that you have been
Bring
doing.
that mic a little closer. Everybody wants to hear.
I want to congratulate you guys on the work you've been doing. I'm really impressed with all of what I've heard so far with the housing solutions that you're trying to come up with. That's amazing. I think that the biggest thing that I see in the community that we need is, like my husband said, we've been trying to take care of this garbage problem ourselves with my family, and it's super hard because I have a minivan and a little tiny trailer, and we pay full price, probably more than anybody that has a home that pays for their garbage. We pay way more than they're paying, and it comes out of my pocket, which I'm fine with that. But we do need help because it's hard for us to hold the burden on ourselves. Basically, we are trying to do our best to give people a safe place to come and talk if they need to, because we are a little bit of a different type of homeless person, I guess. I don't consider myself homeless. You guys know that, I feel like my house, my home is my RV, and I don't think that I'm homeless. But I think that we as a community need to be more open in talking to each other and having open dialogue so we can all conversate and stop pointing fingers, taking pictures, using social media as a platform for hate. I've been guilty of it too, said some nasty things I probably shouldn't have said. But basically, we really need to come together as a community and find a grassroots type of solution. And I think that we can. I think all of you guys are super smart, and I'm really happy to hear, I'm bubbling up with joy to hear that you guys are really working hard on trying to find ways to fix this. That's really good. But we have to remember that some of these people out here, they need outreach. We need somebody that can go out there and talk to them and ask them what they need. It's nice to have a place that they can go get help, but sometimes it's nice to have somebody come to them and be like, hey guys, how you doing this afternoon? What can we do for you? How can we help you? How can we get you out of this situation? That's the only way we're going to be able to do this, is by having relationships with them, with us, like I want to have with you guys. So I think that if we work together with love and compassion, I think the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, the reason they made that ruling is so that we could find, can I just say this last part? We can find humanitarian ways to fix the problem and not criminalize. I think that's what they wanted us to do. And I think we can do it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you.
Keith Page? Welcome, Keith. Thank you. Pull that mic right up to you. There you go.
So some numbers, some statistics. For every dollar that we spend on drug and alcohol treatment, we save $7 on the back end. By the back end, I mean police, fire, emergency room. I have a video I made at the library a couple weeks ago. One guy, drunk on his butt, 2 police officers in 2 separate cars, a fire engine, an ambulance, 4 paramedics. They took the guy on a stretcher to the hospital, not to the gospel mission. I checked. How many tens of thousands of dollars did that cost this community? It's outrageous. I'm from San Diego. I'm not a native Oregonian, but I live here. I love it here. I'm going to stay here the rest of my life. San Diego has the 4th largest homeless population in the country. I think it's about 10,000 now. There was a hepatitis A outbreak in 2017. 15 homeless people died, and they had to come up with a solution. And basically what they did is what Howie's been talking about for a long time. Apparently no one wants to listen. I don't understand. I'm pretty frustrated. I'm not homeless anymore. I got a place through YCAP. I'm waiting for it to get fixed up so I can move in, and I can't wait. It's brutal out here. If you're a woman and you're homeless, it's tough. They get raped, they get beaten, they get their stuff stolen all the time. And there was an incident at 4th and Adams Thursday morning that I have on video, and that video is going to go to the ACLU and it's going to go to Coin TV. If you want to know how to deal with what's going on, look at Coin TV's 5-part series called The Unsheltered Truth. The final installment is called The San Diego Solution. They're doing tremendous stuff down there. The Lucky Duck Foundation, which is in San Diego, but it was the people who started it are from Oregon. His name is Pat Kilkinian. It can be done. We can do this. Why not McMinnville? Why do we not deal with this problem? I'm just saying, we need to get talking about this and get busy. This rogue security guard with a gun who's going around rousting homeless people without any provocation and without any authority. He booted a friend of mine from behind Giraldi's the other night who has permission from the owner of Giraldi's to sleep there. This guy forced him to leave. Where is he supposed to go? What's he supposed to do? This guy has a gun, and he obviously doesn't care for the homeless. I'm sorry, I get a little worked up about this. I'm pretty passionate about this. We can do better, and I hope we will. I hope some people look into the Lucky Duck Foundation, the Alpha Project of San Diego, Square One in Eugene, I believe it is. There are cities, like Howie said, there are cities, there are communities that are doing stuff. This homelessness is a symptom. It's a symptom of drug addiction and alcoholism and mental health issues that have just been ignored for decades.
Thank you,
for your
Keith.
time.
Is it Greg Baugh? Greg, welcome.
Good evening, and thank you, council, for all your work, and
Bring that mic close to you, Greg.
everybody else
Here.
that's doing all this good work, and for an opportunity to come in and express some concerns. I recently went into planning to get a Lux form done for my business. I've done this 5 or 6 or 7 times in the last 4 years, and found that there was a new payment schedule for fees in there. At first, it was fine with me, and I know it takes money to run things and do this business in town. And then I was really surprised at the change from $0 to $1,875. It's quite a considerable difference for what I'm used to. And then I became actually furious and very upset to find out that that $1,875 only applied to my business, which is a cannabis business in town. After doing a little bit of research, I found out that these decisions were made by the council. I think this is true. This is just kind of how I've gathered information. And it was from data gathered from the Planning Commission or Department on how much time it takes to process some of these things. I would like to express a lot of concern with the way this data was read. Data can be read in so many different ways. It's incredible. Depends on your mood and who you are and what you're thinking that day. I can understand that some of these things took a lot of time in the very beginning, and there was a lot of learning. And now it sounds like some of that learning and time has been turned towards repayment by those of us that need to continue getting these forms. These forms are required every year, and every time I have to get a license, I need to come in and get this form. Once it's done one time, how could $1,875 of money be charged for a service of a signature and a redo of a Lux form? And even if it was not the first time, I'd like to see the data and show how a new one, not an old one in the mess of learning, but a new one could possibly take $2,000 of the city planning's time to get a signature saying that this is an appropriate use of a zoned area in McMinnville. It doesn't seem It's discrimination, it's unfair. I could understand an interpretation of data taking people there, but a second look would be very appreciated. In this business, this $1,875 can't be written off. The federal government looks at this as income for me. It's not a business expense. At the end of the year, I have to pay 38% more than that on this brand-new $2,000 fee for a signature on a form. It just seems atrocious. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Greg. John Ashton? Ashton? I'll get it. Welcome, John.
All right, thank you, Mayor, councilors. I'd like to address the homeless issue. I'm a business owner. I employ 6 people over on Miller Street. One of them who was homeless living in their car when I decided to employ them. They now have a place to stay. It's just the people in my area. I live on Riverside Drive as well, and we drive by there every day, and we really feel for the homeless people. Our heart goes out to them, but they're really destroying that area. And I know they have nowhere to go, and it's really, there's some hard things that need to be said, and some hard things that need to be done. You know, we can all sit around and talk about it, but like Valerie said, I think, you know, going down there and having conversations with them, which I've done. I've gone down there, helped people fix cars, took them gas, gave them rides, and it's a real tough situation. You know, we went from, I think I heard some numbers today from like 300 to 1,300 homeless people in Yamhill County. Where are these people coming from? Affordable housing, you know, we're looking at small houses, letting people park in other people's property with their RVs and cars. The prices in McMinnville are very expensive. You know, they could go to Salem and get housing cheaper, or Sheridan, or some of the other surrounding communities, but McMinnville is a, you know, best city downtown, and you know, a few years ago in Parade Magazine, it's going to be a higher cost of living here. So we're looking at making housing in McMinnville where it costs so much more than some of the outlying communities. Some of the people that are there don't want this housing. They just want a place to park their vehicles. And somehow they all ended up over on Marsh Lane and Dustin Court. And giving them a dumpster that fills up in 24 hours, I mean, it's going to keep it a little bit cleaner, like Jacob was talking about. But in the long run, we need to look at a way to clear those streets off. If there is no housing available, we need to find a place for them to park. I've been to a planning commission meeting where we talked about this a few weeks ago. To have somewhere for them to park their vehicles all in one area like that. I drive by there several times a day. The police are there quite often. A lot of drug use going on, domestic violence, crime, and you know, there's a lot of people that want to help, but what can we do as a community for these people? We don't want to just scatter them and turn them away, but what we need to do is make it less comfortable for them to, to want to come here. So, thank you.
Thank you, John. Stacy Mahan? Okay. That's a W, not an N, so.
Correct. No mayhem here.
Welcome, Stacy.
Thank you very much, Mayor. My name is Stacy Mayhew. I'm 50 years old. I've been in Yamhill County for about 25 years. I raised my family here and have been involved in a myriad of different community services. I think when you fall on a certain side of this issue, you're looked at as not being compassionate, which is absolutely untrue. As a matter of fact, I think the reason that we're having this problem is because we live in a community that is totally compassionate, benevolent, generous, giving people, giving businesses, and I think that's part of the reason that we have this problem. I've I was raised, you know, I would go down to Burnside with my mom, and I can remember as a 5-year-old singing at the Union Gospel Mission and serving, and that's the way I was raised, and that's the way I raised my children. We volunteered for many years in Meals on Wheels. I know Howie personally because my sons and I served at the soup kitchen. I've taken pizzas, clothing, blankets, information to the homeless when they will listen to me, which is not very often. You have to want to be helped, and many of them do not want to be helped. I'd like to actually just read the City Council's mission statement. A collaborative and caring city inspiring an exceptional quality of life. That's a quality of life for me as a taxpayer, but it should also be a quality of life for the homeless, and I don't think that they have a good quality of life. It is not a good quality of life to live in filth and human waste, parasites, and infectious disease. And so under the guise of compassion, we're really just exacerbating that situation and not helping them at all. The City of McMinnville delivers high-quality services in collaboration with Partners for a Prosperous, Safe, and Livable Community. I'd like to know how you think that we feel safe walking past the situation on 4th Street or going to pay our bill at Mac Water and Light. I know people that won't even go there because it's like a third world country. It's not safe. And so I'd like to know how you're doing that. You talk about stewardship and equity, courage and accountability to the citizens that elected you to these spaces that you hold. I do believe that you are trying to do what you were elected to do, but I don't believe that it's working, and I think that's obvious by what we're seeing, and that's obvious by why all the citizens are here tonight, most of who are, like myself, compassionate people who care about their city and love their city, and they pay their taxes, and they would like to find a solution to the problem. There are solutions to this problem, and like Howie said, Salt Lake City is doing some great work. Houston is doing some great work in the homeless community, also San Antonio. I brought you all a little copy of your mission statement, and in there I've put some reading for you on the programs that actually are helping to end homelessness, veterans specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Eric Wolf. Welcome, Eric.
So I'm also a citizen of McMinnville. I was born here, went to school here, raised a family here, work here, and participated in our community level, supporting all different individuals with different needs. And some of the things that I want to talk about specifically are, you know, we're not discriminating against people because they're homeless or otherwise, but one thing that needs to be touched upon and reiterated that was just mentioned was safety, and that's public safety for all people, whether you're homeless or have a home. And with the conditions as they are, those individuals are not in safe places, nor is the community necessarily safe as well based on the conditions that we're currently dealing with. And with the fact that this situation is perpetuating itself and is obviously getting worse, by not changing this condition, the essence is the city and its people are accepting this condition, and at some point in time, there's going to be a catastrophic event, whether somebody gets hit by a car, there's a crime committed against someone that results in a serious injury or even death, and what's going to happen to the city as far as its accountability to tolerate this and not change this condition. And when we worry about whether we're going to have insurance or not, that's something I think we need to consider as well, that we're promoting by continuing to see this issue grow. It's a hardship for people in this community that are living in that situation. It's also a hardship for businesses, both in the public sector and private sector. Property values are affected, tourism is affected. Individuals that are taking steps to clean their property, protect their property, and preserve their property, and work on providing a safe space for themselves to the best of their ability. And the community that comes onto their property is also a cost that we're dealing with. The last point I'll make is we're looking for equity, and equity for all, for people that are homeless, but also people that are taxpayers. And we are continuously paying more for fees that's been mentioned, and with I would say some nonsensical reason that we're paying these exorbitant fees that was mentioned earlier today. And you're talking in the same notice saying how we would like to create affordable housing. Well, building housing takes a lot of work. It takes labor, it takes materials, but some of the other costs associated with it are all the fees to start your project, the development fees, the school excise tax, and we're talking now about a construction tax as well. So when we look at equity, let's make sure it's delivered consistently throughout the board, and realize when you don't provide consistency at all levels, you're also inviting more inconsistency and willingness to adhere to these new rules and regulations that are coming up, as well as the ones that exist now.
Thank you, Eric. Joya Goodrum. Welcome, Joya.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Joya Goodrum, President and CEO for the McMinnville Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm here today to express concern regarding the growing homeless and transient issue in our community, especially in the industrial park. I've spoken with several businesses that are being impacted by the encampment at Dustin Court and Marsh Lane. You are also in receipt of a letter and photos from First Federal expressing their concern about the transients camping on 4th. Businesses have experienced unlawful trespassing, theft, and damage to their property. Owners have installed fencing and cameras at significant cost to thwart further theft and unlawful trespass. Drivers on Marsh Lane have been threatened, spit upon, and cursed at while trying to get to Mac Water and Light to pay their bill. The cab company will no longer pick up riders in the area for fear of being robbed or assaulted due to an incident on March 23rd. There are pictures on Facebook of trash piling up on Dustin Court. 4th Street is also strewn with tents, trash, and detritus, effectively blocking the sidewalk behind First Federal. If any business or resident began dumping trash on city property, what would be the outcome of that? Do the residents and businesses of this community have the right to dump trash on their own property? Does one have the right to dump trash on another's private property? Not according to City Code Section 8.16.180, junk, or Section 8.20020, Declaration of Public Nuisance. Therefore, why is the behavior of a group of individuals in our community violating city code acceptable? We have standards of behavior that we are all expected to follow, so please explain why those camping on our streets and sidewalks are not held to that same standard of behavior. The Ninth Circuit Court issued an opinion regarding the rights of homeless individuals. My interpretation of that case is that a city cannot criminalize an individual for sleeping or resting on public property. I did not read in the ruling that littering and defacing public areas is included in the constitutional right to sleep. As representatives of the citizenry of McMinnville, I ask you, is this the town you want to be in? I was on a committee with the city staff, businesses, and residents to craft the MacTown 2032 plan. Homelessness, transients, and drug addiction are our community's biggest issue and should be the city's top priority. We are sensitive to the plight of the homeless in our community, and we want to ensure that the businesses in our community can manage their enterprises and keep our economy strong. We expect our city to enforce the established codes and regulations and apply those rules to all of its citizens. Some businesses feel they have been treated unfairly by the city. Rules should be applied across the board. Your local businesses should not be punished. They are law-abiding citizens and keeping our economy strong. Don't punish them while turning a blind eye to this growing crisis in our community. We'd like to know what the city is doing or planning to do to alleviate the concerns the businesses have regarding the trash, the health, and safety issues. Our businesses have made significant investments in McMinnville. There's a lot of talk about the rights of homeless. What about the rights of the residents, the business owners, and the tax-paying citizens of this community?
Thank you, Joya. Thank you, Joya. Scott?
Over here, I'm here.
Yep, I know you're up front.
I made 2 videos, one of Marsh and one of Dustin, and they're a total of 3 minutes, 2 seconds, because I knew you'd keep me there. So let me hit. Okay, so I thought I would just play and talk at the same time, because last time I was here, I issued the Dustin Court Challenge, which I hopefully you all went down. I asked you not to get out of your car, but just see what I'm looking at. And today, I'm here. I'm not, all the RVs, I'm saying they're not even homeless. What I'm talking about is the boulevards. I'm talking about, it's too bad it's not dark, you can't see, but it's interesting. These coming up, there's like subfloors. These people have been here for months. Did you see that one? Months and months. There is no reason they are not expecting to move. This is their home, okay? This is what I would like to see. I'm not even, like I said, talking about RVs. Let me just get to my notes here. Is that if you want to sleep in a home, if you don't want to sleep in a homeless shelter, and you want a place to squat, you can. That's what I've always said. If you want to squat, if you want to be homeless, you can be. But the place to do it is not on our boulevards. It's amazing that this is YCAP's boulevard. That's private property. And we are allowing people to squat on the sidewalk, on 4th Street, squatting on the boulevards. On the other side, we built a fence. That is private property boulevard, okay? And it's amazing to me. Okay, the RVs are sitting on the street, but it's the sprawl of the RVs and the people that are living on the boulevards. Why we're allowing that blows my mind. So what I'm saying is that we have to, let me just go right to number 1. There we go. The city needs to acknowledge that people are going to squat in McMinnville. And right now, because you're so afraid of the 9th District interpretation, that you're just gun shy of doing anything. Well, with you doing nothing, you are sending out this signal that the police department, hands off. McMinnville is welcome. Oh, look at this one. This is right across the front door of McMinnville, coming up, bam. Really? Okay, so we need a place. And I'm not saying we need to build a large facility, but we need a place to say, if you want to squat, it should not be in our industrial park. It should be out on the edges of the city. If you want to squat, we will give you a place to squat, maybe bring the bus out, but we need to have a place that people can do it. Right now, the city has no place, and since we have no place, that's why you're gun shy of the 9th District. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. David Antinica. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. I'm aware this is a very complex problem. I'm sure a lot of people are working on this. And as a citizen, I actually have not much to ask, but to know that the problem is being addressed the way that I think most citizens want to see it addressed. I see there are different groups. Homeless is not a category, really. There's probably somebody who has drug problems, mental problems, abuse in the family or family problems, and then there's other people who just like to live that way. And I think as much as I'd like to help the ones that have objective problems, so somebody who has a drug problem or such, I don't think we should enable the people who don't have that sort of problem just choose to live that way with our money. I know it's a hard thing to say, but I think we're all here because there is a problem. I'm sure everybody would have one more thing to add to that, but As a citizen, I'd be happy to help the people who need it, need a hand up, but I don't think we should pay for a handout. And sorry, a little bit worked up about this. Is the city gonna, does the police department, do the people who reach out to these people have an idea of where they're at? And if I want to help somebody through the city, through outreach, through money, do I know that it's going to the right people, or am I being taken advantage of? And I think that's something that everybody would like to know, because I don't think anybody is not compassionate, but I don't want to enable, and I don't want other cities to think McMinnville is a place to send their people. I'm amazed that so many more homeless people are around since the economy is doing pretty well. I would expect that in 2009 there'd be more than there are today. So something's not working, but I'd like to see that the right problems are addressed. I don't know if the city has this information or if the police can kind of put people in different groups, and I'm glad, I think most people would be glad to help the people who need it. I think I wouldn't be happy to just give a solution to anybody just because they're homeless, because I want to know why they're homeless, and if me helping them is going to help them or just make them, what's the word, enable them there. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And our last public comment, Kate Miller.
Thank you to allow me to talk today. I would like to discuss about the unfortunate human being that who have no house to live. I have a 3 times experience with them. Once they damaged my gazebo where it's my food truck park, then I called the cops. I understand they said no any camera or any witness that I can ask them to help to catch that guy. And then the second one is get escalated because me and my daughter were sitting outside the gazebo, outside the food truck, and they have a homeless guy walk past us. And out of the blue, he ran back and he about to punch me. And my daughter's only 9 years old and she's so scared. And then I yelled, he ran back towards the truck again. I put my kid in the truck and then tried to grab everything on the table outside. He ran to me again, and I ran back to my truck and I called the cops. No, I called the dispatcher. The dispatcher asked me, does that man have a weapon? I said no, but he about to punch me with his fist. The dispatcher said, nothing we can do. I done nothing to them. I was sitting and chat with my girl. And when I asked for protection, that's all I got. And they kept coming, harassing me, talk to me really rude words when they approach and want some free meal. And I said, sir, I cannot give it to you. Suddenly the voice changed. I know you're gonna say that and B words. Just go back to your country. I tried to work for a living, to pay tax, to be a good citizen. But I got harassed so many times, and I felt unsafe. Anytime, I didn't mean that all the homeless are bad, but anytime when I see some of them come close to my food truck, I'm looking for the knife to protect myself. I would like to ask for favor, if you can do anything, as I'm a citizen, as I'm a local, people who live in McMinnville, at least make me feel safe in this town. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kate.
Worse, and the price monetarily, as well as what you're doing to this community, is going to be great.
Thanks.
I apologize.
We thank you for your comments tonight. We've listened, and feel free to reach out to staff or members of the council. And we're working on a very difficult situation. So again, thank you for coming tonight and the ability to share your story, whatever side that might be on, and the listening. And I can tell you right now, from a council perspective, we're listening. So thank you.
Let's make sure we do something. Stop listening. Stop talking.
So we're going to proceed with the rest of our council meeting this evening, and you're free to stay and be a part of that. Again, yes? Come and get a card, Kate. Come and get my card and give me a call. Let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. That's how to get a I think I'll jump and finish our advice and informational items and go over to department heads. Dwayne, it's good to have you here tonight. Anything from our police department? Chief?
Your Honor, nothing at this time other than the agenda items. I'm here.
Okay. Marcia? Susan? Jenny?
I wanted to, but I didn't get a chance.
Okay.
Great to see you, too.
Okay.
Nothing.
Kylie and Heather?
I just have one thing.
Okay.
I apologize to break the stream here, but tomorrow night we have a public open house from 4:30 to 6:30 for the 3 Mile Lane area plan over at Chemeketa College.
Thank you, Heather. Mike? Melissa?
Nope.
A couple of things, Mayor, members of the council. You'll notice the city attorney Kosh is not here tonight. That his family welcomed his first grandchild. Felix joined the family at about noon today, and the mother was in labor for about 24 hours, so they're still dealing with baby recovery. Baby is healthy and well. He did send a couple of pictures I'll share with you if you're interested in seeing later. I did want to follow up on the request that Councilor Peralta made during reports from the council. There's been some discussion at this dais a couple of times about the legislative concepts identified in Senate Bill 595. If the council is interested in expressing some specific support for those legislative concepts, we've already done a fair amount of work through the Affordable Housing Task Force on that issue, and some staff work based on the task force recommendation. If the council wants to go on record supporting the legislative concepts, I think a motion to that effect is all we would need. But if you want to make that motion and or have some discussion.
Go ahead, pull your,
I'm putting it out there.
let's just go around. Thumbs up or thumbs down, just.
I am in thumbs up support of
So that was kind of, okay. Adam? Yeah. Okay. So I think, let's take a motion then, that we would have a letter of support on a bill, is the Senate bill, isn't it? 595?
I would so move that the city council make a letter of support in supporting the Affordable Housing Task Force. This is support of Senate Bill 595.
Okay. It's been moved by Zach and seconded by Kelly. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please indicate. Okay, so we'll direct staff then to move forward on that, and we can get that on the record. Scott, I missed you. Any reports this evening from IT? Thank you, sir. Okay. Our consent agenda this evening is considering the minutes of the joint meeting of the City Council and the Buildable Lands Inventory Housing Needs Analysis and Building Housing Strategy Project Advisory Committee and regular meeting of the City Council on January 16th, 2019, the minutes of the February 12th City Council work session and regular meeting, minutes of the February 26th, 2019 City Council work session and regular meeting, and minutes of the March 26th work session and regular meeting, regular meetings. And we also are considering a request from DHF Holdings, Inc. for an OLCC license winery second location located at 829 Northeast 5th Street, number 7, or 700. Are there any councilors that would like to have anything removed off of the consent agenda? If not, I will ask for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Kelly and seconded by Wendy. All those in favor to approve the consent agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, indicate by saying nay. The consent agenda passes unanimously this evening. This takes us to our ordinances this evening. The first reading with a possible second reading of ordinance number 5066. We will consider this ordinance. Does any councilor object to having this ordinance read by title only? If not, we will have our Assistant City Attorney read that, the first reading of ordinance number 5066.
This is the first reading of ordinance number 5066, an ordinance amending the comprehensive plan specific to Chapter 9, urbanization, and Chapter 10, citizen involvement and plan amendment, to incorporate great neighborhood principles into the city's land use planning program.
Thank you, Natalie. Chuck, if you'd come up and walk us through a discussion on this ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councilors. So this ordinance 5066 is a land use application for legislative amendments to our comprehensive plan to incorporate the great neighborhood principles into our land use planning program. So they are comprehensive plan text amendments. They're legislative. A legislative hearing was held with Planning Commission, and they were providing a recommendation to you tonight to, and that recommendation was to approve and adopt the comprehensive plan text amendments. So that's what decision you would be making tonight with action on this item. So the Great Neighborhood Principles is a project that was completed by the Planning Department. It was part of the Planning Commission's work plan for the past couple of years. And really the idea behind the project was to answer the questions of what makes a great neighborhood in McMinnville, what elements should be included in a neighborhood, either existing or new, to make it great. Kind of this graphic summarizes that by looking at all those things that go into a neighborhood and to the built environment that contribute to a neighborhood and provide the amenities that people want to see. And specifically, we were looking for what people in McMinnville thought was important to our community here. So the purpose was to develop these great neighborhood principles, as we're referring to them, that identify those specific elements, and it was always intended that those would be adopted into our comprehensive plan and be used to draft future code amendments and to guide future development in our community as we see growth occurring. And overall, just doing that in a way that ensures that all places and neighborhoods are livable, healthy, safe for all residents of our city. So this is the project timeline. I'll just summarize it that we started in September. We formed a project advisory committee who met about monthly throughout the process and oversaw the development of the project. We had a public open house. We had some outreach that we did, online presence as well. Specifically, we had an online survey and also had hard copies around the city where we got a lot of input from the community. We had our public open house. We went around to the service clubs and just got the word out about the project and got some community buy-in for it that way. Did some other newspaper and school flyer announcements, and I think all that helped us to get a lot of input on our online survey. That was the place that we got the most input and guidance in developing the recommended language that you'll be looking at tonight. So our project advisory committee, they met throughout the process. At the culmination of it, they had recommended and advised staff to start drafting some of the comp plan text amendments that they reviewed eventually in January. And they reviewed those text amendments and suggested that they be brought forward through the formal review process with Planning Commission and City Council. These were actually shared with you at that joint meeting of the BLI HNA Housing Strategy Project Advisory Committee. The day after that project advisory committee for this project took that action. So I'll share that with you and point out some of the small things that have changed since that time. But we did bring it through Planning Commission. Planning Commission held a work session on it in February, supported the concepts, and with some minor amendments, moved it forward for a public hearing, which was held last month in March. And they did, like I said, made a motion to recommend approval to the City Council. So the actual comp plan text amendments themselves are proposed to be added to the urbanization chapter of the comp plan. That chapter kind of has the high level process in terms of the land use program and how the city will urbanize. So we're proposing to add a new section titled Great Neighborhood Principles, and each of those principles would be added as a policy within that section. That's the way the comp plan is formatted, with goals, policies, and proposals. So the proposals that we included, and as they're intended, are meant to be actions, future actions that the city can take to further implement the policies and in the Great Neighborhood Principles. So I'll walk through each one of them and summarize them. I won't read through them all in detail, but they are in your packet. And if you have any questions at the end, I'd be happy to answer those. So the first one is a policy, and it kind of establishes the framework for what this is intended to do. So the principles are intended to guide the land use patterns, design, and development of the places that McMinnville citizens live, work, and play. Ensure that all those places are livable, social, inclusive, safe, and vibrant. The second one is that the Great Neighborhood Principles will not function independently, and that wasn't the intent of them. They were intended to all be applied together as a applied approach to neighborhood design to make sure that all of these things are being achieved in every neighborhood and every place in the city so that a great neighborhood is accessible to everyone. We did add some language throughout the Planning Commission process, which I'll touch on a little bit later, that our neighborhood design will also help support today's technology and infrastructure and can accommodate future technology and infrastructure. This policy just kind of reiterates that the principles will be applied in all areas of the city, kind of trying to get at that equity issue and that we're providing a great place to live regardless of the location in the city. Then we have language in this policy that states that the principles will guide long-range planning efforts and also applicable current land use and development applications. And this can, like I said, will develop more detail potentially in code amendments in terms of what exactly the current land use projects that would apply. But this language intends that it'll guide future growth as it occurs in the city. And then we get into policy 187.5, which lists each principle, and then it states that each principle is followed by language that provides some direction on how the principle can be achieved. So I'll go through each of them. There are 13 of them. I won't read them all in detail. I'll just kind of touch on the main point, and then I'll just say some of these pictures in here are some of the things that we included in our outreach that received positive feedback, so just kind of visually showing what kind of the intent of the principle is. So the first one is natural feature preservation. So neighborhoods are designed to preserve significant natural features. The second principle is scenic views. Great neighborhoods preserve scenic views in areas that everyone can access. The third is parks and open space, and this was probably one that got the most support in our outreach. So great neighborhoods have open and recreational spaces to walk, play, gather, and commune as a neighborhood. We have some language in there with some more detail on kind of how that could be achieved, like providing open space at a scale relative to the development that's occurring, providing central locations, and that parks are developed in accordance with the Parks Master Plan. The next principle is pedestrian friendly. So great neighborhoods are pedestrian friendly for people of all ages and abilities. And similarly, bike friendly for people of all ages and abilities, and both the pedestrian and bike friendly kind of call for a network that's safe and enjoyable, not just for transportation, but for other reasons like health and recreation and social interaction. And we identify some specific things that we'd like to see connections prioritized to, like schools and other community facilities and parks. The next principle is related to connected streets, and so this is intended to provide for a connected street network as neighborhoods are developed to increase travel route options and connectivity between the built places and easy pedestrian and bicycle use. Again, just more language on that. We did include, based on some Planning Commission conversation, some language in here that streets are designed to encourage more pedestrian, bicycle, and transit mobility with a goal of less reliance on vehicles for transportation. The seventh principle is accessibility. So great neighborhoods are designed to be accessible for all people of all ages and abilities. And this was intended to kind of go above and beyond what minimum practices are and encourage further design practices that support accessible places. The eighth is human scale design. This one's related to how our built environment is designed to be comfortable at a human scale and foster human interaction with the built environment. And these are just some of the examples of that. So spaces that are accommodating for pedestrians, buildings that are oriented towards the street, and those types of things. The ninth is mix of activities. Great neighborhoods provide easy and convenient access to many of the destinations, activities, and local services that residents use on a daily basis. And the focus on this one was kind of the neighborhood serving commercial and other types of uses at a scale that's compatible with the surrounding residential area and in a way that is accessible to people so that they can access the goods and services they need within their neighborhood. And again, coming off of the Planning Commission conversation, again, an intent of this was that those activities and those services are available so that people can have less reliance on a vehicle. The 10th principle is urban-rural interface, and great neighborhoods complement rural areas and provide a transition between urban and rural uses. And the next two focus on housing. So there's an intent here to provide for a diversity of housing types in neighborhoods. So the first one is housing for diverse incomes and generations, providing those opportunities for people and families with a wide range of incomes and for people and families in all stages of life. So kind of the multi-generational housing and ability to age in place. And housing variety, that great neighborhoods have a variety of building forms and architectural variety to avoid monoculture design. And we didn't want to include language on limiting housing form in any way, but just that there is some variety and differentiation in the built environment. And the last principle is unique and integrated design elements. And these are things that didn't score as highly in some of the outreach that we did, so they were included as kind of an encouragement, but that neighborhoods include environmentally friendly construction techniques, opportunities for public art, and neighborhood elements and features that are consistent throughout the neighborhood. And these are just some photo examples of some of the things that were identified as desirable through the process. And so then I mentioned that proposals would follow the principles, and those proposals are future activities that the city could take to further implement the principles. There's 10 of these that are proposed. The first is to do a state or a citywide inventory of Goal 5 resources. So these are things like our natural resources that we'd like to protect, having an inventory of where those are so we can plan for them as growth occurs. Similarly, doing an inventory of landmark trees that are of significance or value to the city's environment or history. The next one deals with park and open space requirements and how those would be drafted to be proportional based on the size of development that's occurring. And this proposal kind of provide some guidance for how that would occur and defining exactly what that would be in terms of basing it on number of dwelling units or size of the development and coming up with some thresholds for the type of open space that might be required for each type of development. The next two proposals relate to completing an updated bicycle plan and pedestrian plan to guide the growth of those networks throughout the city, and that those could be completed as an appendix to the transportation system plan or as part of an update to the overall transportation system plan. 45 and 46 relate to developing site and design requirements for how commercial and industrial development would occur, and then also for developing codes that allow for a variety of housing types and forms, and site and design requirements for those housing types and forms.
And on 45, Chuck, the development of a site requirement, we do not have that at this particular time. Is that correct?
That's correct. We have some design and development standards for like certain areas of town, like the downtown and some of our planned development overlay areas, but this would be for all commercial and industrial uses. Similar with housing as well. So developing some site and design requirements for different housing types so that they're compatible with the existing built environment. Number 47 is one that was added during the Planning Commission process so that the city will evaluate the impact of future technology on neighborhood design and develop codes that support today's technology and infrastructure but can accommodate future technology and infrastructure as well. And that was also in response to some comments from McMinnville Water and Light, which I'll touch on in a moment. And then finally, that the city will develop design and development standards that allow for coordinated incorporation of existing and future infrastructure into neighborhoods. So those are all the amendments that are included in the decision document before you tonight. Just wanted to touch on the testimony that was received as well. Like I said, we got a lot of outreach during the process that we went through with the Project Advisory Committee. Once we got to the public testimony period, we completed the standard public hearing notices. We didn't receive any public testimony throughout the public hearing process. We did get one list of suggested amendments to the Great Neighborhood Principles from McMinnville Water and Light, and that was included in your packet. It was shared with the Planning Commission, and they discussed it during the public hearing. They found that the scale and the scope of some of the proposed amendments were too detailed for the policy level language that the Great Neighborhood Principles were intended to be. So they did address the comments, and they drafted those proposals that were on the pass screen to provide for some guidance in how we could still work towards a coordinated approach to infrastructure design and incorporating that into our neighborhoods, and that we can continue to work on that. And so that was the Planning Commission's response to the comments and what was included.
So again, would that possibly be, as we're looking at a more high density, the ability for Water and Light to get their lines of water and electricity into the locations and having some variances there possibly, or?
I think that's all to be discussed as we continue to talk about development standards and how those relate to infrastructure. And those are conversations that we'll have with McMinnville Water and Light, but they're included in our development and review process now, obviously, and we'll continue to do that. And just make sure we have a coordinated approach to infrastructure development as growth occurs in our community.
I know on landscape that there's a good working relationship that before we move forward on any of those landscaping designs, that Water and Light has to give their stamp of approval that it's appropriate to get their services to the to the homes and the buildings. So,
yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good example. They're heavily involved in the landscape plan review and street tree placement and ensuring that those things are happening in places that don't conflict with infrastructure. So based on that and the process that we went through, staff's recommending and coming out of the Planning Commission and the Project Advisory Committee that the comprehensive plan text amendments be approved as they're presented in Ordinance 5066, and that includes some of those additional amendments that I mentioned and touched on in the staff report in response to the McMinnville Water and Light comments. Those are all included in the ordinance. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have for me at this point.
So let's open it up for council discussion. Any questions or discussion we need to? Wendy?
Thanks. I think the principles that you guys came up with, everybody who worked on this, are awesome and a great addition to our ordinances. I had a question about what the next steps are for this, how it specifically will be integrated into our process of looking at new subdivisions and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Will be a part of the application questions, just kind of the boots on the ground.
Yeah.
How we get from the high level, like we want to see this in communities, to actually having it implemented.
Yep, that's a great question. So if these are adopted into the comprehensive plan, they become policies, and the comprehensive plan states that policies are applicable when the city, the planning commission, the city council is making a land use decision on any particular application. So they will need to be addressed in a development or an applicant's land use application. So they'll have to provide findings for how they're meeting these policies. Now, they are kind of high level at this point, so they would be providing their argument for how they believe they're meeting it in their development proposal. And until we, follow some of the proposals and potentially draft more code amendments that get more specific, that's how they would be applied to land use applications at this point. And then the city has the opportunity, as we go through potential code amendments and clarifications and getting into more detail, like the park and open space requirements, determining what those levels might be that are appropriate. Until we get to that, the policies will be our the language we would use to take action on any request that's before you.
So it opens up the dialogue at this point that they have to address it, that because it's not very specific yet, it would be like, there would be some discretion.
Correct, yeah, that was the intent of them being a higher level policy level in the language as it's proposed, but yeah, they would need to be addressed in an application. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
Well, go ahead, Zach.
Go ahead, Zach, and then, okay.
Oh,
Kelly?
okay. I guess the only thing I wanted to add is, as I'm thinking about this with the focus with the urban growth boundary issues and things like that, and such a focus on density, in a sense, this provides kind of a roadmap to make the community livable, even if you do add density. This forces a certain level of livability that we have to have, and it's an important part of the urban growth boundary discussion.
And that was an intent of doing this process now as we're going through our buildable lands inventory and housing needs analysis and housing strategy, was understanding what our community wants to see in our neighborhoods as we grow, making sure we include all these things as we start to plan, and in our next step of doing our urbanization report and figuring out what we need for parks and open space and schools to support residential growth. We wanted this process to be done and have some community buy-in for how that growth might occur. So that was the intent of doing it at this point in our steps in the long range planning that we're working through right now.
Any other discussion? Sal?
Do we have any current requirements for adding trees as people build residential inventory? And can you explain what those are to me, because I'm not familiar with them?
Yeah, we actually have a whole chapter in our zoning code on trees. But yeah, we require street trees, so that's the main thing that we require specifically for new residential development. Any multiple family or subdivision is required to plant street trees in the planter strip between the sidewalk and the street. And then outside of that, for other development, we have landscaping requirements where landscaping needs to be provided on development sites, so that can be trees, it can be shrubs, a combination of those things. But yeah, we do have standards in place for incorporation of trees into our neighborhoods. And trees was something that came up also in our survey that was very highly supported. So we made sure to include that in some of the language you saw here.
Yeah, I'm wondering, would this be an appropriate place, or would there be an appropriate place for us to kind of review that part of the city ordinance? I have been following the climate change conversation, and one of the strategies is communities should plant more trees, and we've been a Tree City USA city for 40-something years, I think the mayor said tonight. And I'm wondering if that's something that we should consider from a policy standpoint to encourage, and whether that can be part of this process.
I think you need to go with Zach to the Landscape Review Committee. It's a well-attended committee. Scott and I frequently go. You'd really understand the tree situation.
Was that where I need to go to get the tree skinny? Okay.
It's well addressed, trust me.
Yeah, we spend so much time and effort on street trees, and you can't take down a tree without replacing it. It is a very intense process with even the right types of species of tree that is replaced. We have a lot of good discussions.
Well, it's just we're doing something on plastic bags to do our part, and it occurs to me that if we plant a billion trees, we're going to do something to address climate change, and maybe that's something we should be thinking about as a city going forward, that should be, but I'll talk to Zach offline.
So Councilor Peralta, if I can just respond to that. First of all, if you are coming to the Landscape Review Committee and Councilor Menke, Mayor Hill, and Councilor Geary are all coming, let us know so we can notice it as a quorum of City Council. But anyways, with that said, the Landscape Review Committee has a work plan. Part of their work plan is looking at those sort of proactive discussions over this next year. We've been fairly reactive in the way we approach landscaping. Traditional, you heard about it, street trees, you got to have so much of a percentage of your property. And it's been a lot from a sort of an aesthetic viewpoint, and with Jamie Fleckenstein being a landscape architect and the knowledge that he brings to bear, he's working with them to get them into sort of the next level of discussion as to how to leverage landscaping for future planning in a community. So that's a great dialogue to bring to them.
You want to mention the street tree list too? Or?
That will be, Jamie will be bringing you some stuff at your meeting on April 23rd as well. So we can have more discussion about it then.
I think the sum total of my contribution has already been made for the. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other comments? Okay, we've had our first reading. I'll ask for a motion to pass ordinance number 5066 to a second reading.
So moved.
It's been moved by Zach and seconded by Sal. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please indicate by saying nay. Okay, we will ask our Assistant City Attorney, Natalie, if you would have a second reading of ordinance number 5066 by title only.
This is the second reading of ordinance number 5066, an ordinance amending the comprehensive plan specific to Chapter 9, urbanization, and Chapter 10, citizen involvement and plan amendment to incorporate great neighborhood principles into the city's land use planning program.
Thanks, Natalie. I will ask for a motion to adopt ordinance number 5066.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
So it's been moved by Kelly and seconded by, was it Adam?
Sal.
Or Sal. And so I will call on the city recorder to poll the council.
Councillor Drobkin?
Aye.
Councillor Garvin?
Aye.
Councillor Gary?
Aye.
Councillor Peralta?
Aye.
Councillor Stassens?
Aye.
Council President Minke?
Aye.
So ordinance number 5066 is adopted by a vote of 6-0. Thank you. That takes us to our second ordinance this evening, the first reading with a possible second reading of ordinance 5067. Is there anyone that objects to having this ordinance read by title only? Hearing none, I'll ask Natalie to read the first reading of ordinance 5067 by title only.
This is the first reading of ordinance number 5067, an ordinance amending Chapter 3.18 of the McMinnville City Code to add sections providing supplemental standards for small wireless facilities within the public right-of-way and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Natalie. Tom, if you would present to the council.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and councilors. The item before you is, would amend the city code as relates to your strategic priority and goal of growth and development character to guide growth and development strategically, responsibly, and responsibly to enhance our unique character. So this would amend, there are currently provisions in the Chapter 3.18 of the Municipal Code pertaining to telecommunications infrastructure. This would add a section providing additional standards for small wireless facilities within the public right-of-way and declaring an emergency, making the ordinance effective upon passage. So a little background, the city currently regulates wireless facilities as part of the zoning ordinance. This action is necessitated by an action taken by the FCC last fall dealing with requirements for cities pertaining to a subset of telecommunication facilities within the public right-of-way, which the term used in the FCC ruling is small wireless facilities, SWFs for short in here. And so those differ in some ways from kind of the historic cell towers you might have seen. These are the smaller types of things that are typically either mounted on existing utility poles or on independent poles. By definition, those things that the city must address for small wireless facilities are defined in the FCC definitions and included in your ordinance. So they're these smaller antennas that are 3 cubic feet or less, and other equipment enclosures are 28 cubic feet or less. And there's some other provisions in the definitions as well relating to whether the structures require registration and consistency with certain radio frequency limitations. So here are just a couple of visuals to give you a sense of kind of the scale of the old either cell tower, kind of what is now sometimes referred to as macro installations versus micro installations. So these aren't the big cell towers with big antenna arrays, either the large monopoles or the lattice towers. These are, again, things that are more on what you would typically see on more of a small utility pole or streetlight type of installation. This just gives you a sense of the size of those things that were defined earlier, 3 cubic feet for antennas and 28 cubic feet for the equipment boxes. These are some illustrations that give you a sense of that. The one on the left just shows you what that might look like with what's sometimes called a canister antenna, or for short, a cantenna, with an equipment enclosure on the ground. The middle one shows what that might look like if those were installed on a pole. And then a lot of the standards deal with, that are proposed, deal with these designs that are available now from equipment manufacturers. So there are streetlight poles or freestanding poles that are specifically designed to incorporate installations for antennas, that all of the wiring and cabling can be hidden behind the enclosures and incorporated internal to the poles. And the example on the right shows the equipment cabinets actually integrated into the base of the pole, so you don't have the freestanding equipment cabinet. So those are kind of the size and scale of what we're talking about. Just some other examples of what those installations often look like.
That woman's really tall.
That one, it's as tall as those buildings behind her. The FCC declaratory ruling really dealt with kind of 3 major topics. One is standards, one is procedures and timelines, and the other one is fees. So in terms of standards, they said by April 15th, cities may only enforce aesthetic, undergrounding, and spacing standards that meet those 3 bullet points. They have to be reasonable, no more burdensome than those applied to other types of infrastructure deployments, and objective and published in advance. So that's, again, why we're here this evening. In terms of the procedures and timelines, there are some requirements that cities have to accept batch applications. So typically on these smaller network deployments, instead of installing one antenna at a location, they're usually installing, it's the term that's used for this, as there's more deployment of the current 4G technology and the forthcoming, somewhere down the road, don't know when yet, 5G technology is this densification where there's a smaller infill with these smaller types of facilities. So typically applications come in with multiple installations at a time in batches, and the FCC provisions provide that all authorizations that are needed for a deployment would need to include all those local approvals as part of an application process that's subject to these time processing provisions that are the presumptively reasonable time period. So 60 days if an antenna is to be co-located on an existing pole, or 90 days if there's a new pole installation. And cities can conduct a completeness review within 10 days. If an application is not complete, then that stops and restarts that processing timeline. The next item on your agenda actually is a resolution addressing fees. So the FCC ruling provides for these presumptive fees, providing you can establish a $500 fee for up to 5 applications that are submitted as part of a batch, or an additional 100 for each one above that. You can charge an annual recurring fee of $270 per facility. And then cities, and actually in the case of a pole owner, which may not be the city, so we have pole owners that include McMinnville Water and Light, but the city and the pole owners have authority to recuperate costs associated with what's called make-ready expenses to prepare the right-of-way or the pole for installation of these facilities. There's authorization to charge higher fees based on those 3 bullet points that are noted on the overhead. At this point, we don't have a lot of history what the actual costs might be, but that might be something to revisit at a future date. So I won't go through all of the standards that are proposed in the ordinance for these, but essentially the first part of the ordinance outlines a series of principles, and so those individual standards follow through with these, the intent to achieve these principles. So first of all, where we have these installations, it may include replacement of poles or equipment enclosures, some of those things. First principle is to avoid installations in those areas that are most visually and aesthetically sensitive, pedestrian-oriented areas where have something like 3rd Street where those facilities are right in the space that are designed for occupancy by people, as opposed to something like an installation on a streetlight pole or utility that might be elsewhere in the community. And some of those, particularly if McMinnville Water and Light also adopted at their last board meeting their standards as a pole owner for attachment to those. In some cases, they may not allow for equipment enclosures to be mounted on the pole or undergrounded. So that would mean in some cases, if there are poles where they can't be, these equipment enclosures can't be incorporated into the base of a pole, then some of those equipment enclosures, might be competing for sidewalk space in those pedestrian areas. So trying to avoid that situation where we have a lot of these boxes with these denser deployments taking up a lot of pedestrian space. Second item, kind of the major principle, is to require co-location on existing poles or replacement poles that are designed to incorporate all of that wiring and have those equipment boxes integrated into the pole design and to match those closely to existing designs for streetlights and things like that we have now. I'll have some graphics to share with you here in a moment too, but third principle is to avoid installations on pole types that would have an essentially undesirably alter the desired aesthetic effect. So start trying to put antennas on top of things like the single acorn type lights or lantern type lights. It can look kind of strange. For some of the wooden utility poles we have, it's not going to always be feasible to replace a pole that would incorporate that equipment internally. So in those areas where installations may occur on the wooden poles, then we want to make sure at least the equipment's enclosed behind enclosures and that the cabling's routed to the ground and conduit, so that's reduces some of the clutter. And generally those external above ground equipment enclosures are really our last resort, except for some of those installations on wood utility poles that can't be replaced to incorporate those internally. So we'd want to avoid those in the pedestrian oriented areas, and if they're allowed elsewhere, we want those to be behind the sidewalk and not in the middle of the pedestrian areas or landscape areas. Last principle is kind of relating to the technology, looking at future technologies over time that you just heard in the Great Neighborhood Principles, is to look at whether going forward as technologies evolve, whether there might be some instances where either citywide or for special districts it might make sense to look at some other standards or specifications that incorporate some of the smart pole or smart city technologies. So this graphic shows an example of where some of those antennas are incorporated into the pole below the streetlight luminaire itself, where there's a range of different kind of aesthetic treatments for those streetlights. There's typically space for deployment of other smart city types of technology within the poles in addition to the antennas. And then again, the equipment can be incorporated into the base. So you really reduce a lot of the clutter and can accommodate a lot of the technology in a more consistent and pleasing design. So here's some of the examples, reading through the standards of installations that are would be not permitted. So the first one's what would be considered a strand-mounted antenna hung off of utility lines. The second one is the example I mentioned earlier, where you have kind of the antenna stuck on top. This one's actually designed by a manufacturer, but it really is a different look than when you put an antenna on top of something like an acorn luminaire than you don't have that around, it looks pretty unusual. If that's, depending on what look you're going for in your kind of decorative areas, that may not be a good fit. Here are some of the examples of just different boxes and all the wiring and cabling deployed on utility poles. Some of these are probably larger than what would be allowed under the small wireless facility deployments, but a lot of equipment, a lot of cabling, all visible. Some of these, and these are all more probably community-wide installations. It doesn't look like those are examples on kind of downtown poles, but you could get the same type of thing on some of your decorative light poles. Could be pretty disruptive to your aesthetics. And again, a few examples of what it looks like, even with some of the things done well. You have some of the enclosures or the antennas, but a lot of the cabling's exposed. The bottom right there, you have an example where the equipment's incorporated into the base of the pole, but it's pretty large and doesn't really match the aesthetics of what's around it. And the antenna on top, while it's a canister type of antenna, it doesn't transition, so it's a little less discreet how it ties onto the pole itself. Here's an example. It's a little bit hard to see the color here, but this is actually a photo in one community where it's not a bad installation, but these are actually contrasting, where the closer pole installation has more of the design that matches the style of the pole. The collar where the antenna attaches is more of a decorative kind of treatment that's consistent with the theme of the street light. The one in the back, it's a little bit hard to tell from this, but the antenna is actually a different color than the street light and has some of the external cabling visible. Our standards are designed to approximate what you see in the foreground rather than the background. Here's another example of, this is a freestanding pole in a couple of these, but an installation where there's an attached street light, but again, the antenna is pretty unobtrusive and the equipment's all internal and incorporated into the base of the pole. So those, just want to give you some visuals to go with the standards that are in your packet. Again, we're recommending approval of the ordinance as proposed, so the standards are adopted in effect prior to April 15th, and we'd have the standards that would achieve the requirements in the FCC ruling. I don't believe there's anything that would preclude the city from going back and revisiting and amending these standards so long as we have these in place prior to the 15th too. So. And,
thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
And before our discussion, I just would thank the planning department on a quick turnaround on this. I think many cities are not prepared for what we've done in such a short time. John Dietz and myself had an opportunity to go back to the American Public Power Association, and this is one of the classes we took, and we've taken a number of these, but what's happened in the last year with the FCC regulating and taking more control in this area, we came back and we had this April 15th deadline, and as you can tell, it's pretty technical stuff and a lot that needed to be accomplished. And so I know we had to kind of clean off the desk a little bit and really formulate this. Water and Light, we had an opportunity to take it to the commission at our last meeting, and it's great that we've made our April 15th deadline, because now it gives us the ability to have some control over this area, because if you'd passed April 15th, the FCC would have a lot more control. And so thank you for the focus and the fine work that from my perspective and the training I've had seems to address. So with that being said, I open it up for any discussion among the council.
Just one thing. I know we looked at, we did something similar with wireless and poles and stuff like that, antennas and things like that. Does this just kind of insert in there for the changes, or are you going to have to go through line by line and change a lot of that?
No, so this is proposed to be incorporated as a new section in Chapter 3.18 of the Municipal Code. With some of the FCC timeline, the processing timelines identified there, that some of that may be different than what we have in the land use provisions in the zoning ordinance. So those
So
would
these take
continue to
precedent?
apply unless there's a conflict that deals with the small facilities within the right-of-way, and these, in which case these would override those other provisions. We need to follow the procedures in here and the right-of-way installations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My recollection was that the main difference was that in our city code that we adopted last year for these small facilities, that the height restriction was less than what's in this. Is that right? We had 40 feet and this is 50?
So the definition of small wireless facilities in the FCC ruling is that 50-foot limit. Essentially, the way our standards, for the most part, hopefully will work is if they're looking at co-locating an existing street light pole or a replacement, that's going to be whatever's compatible with what's in the
So you
area.
won't hit the upper limit, it's just going to be what's the percentage above the height of the existing structure.
Yeah, and there's 3 tests that have to be met in there. So one is can't be more than 10% taller than surrounding adjacent structures. The other one deals with the 50-foot height limit. And this is just in the definition again. So there may be some instances where achieving compliance with these standards may require it to be consistent with a standard that would be lower potentially.
That's my question. So we'd have to move up. If our restriction's 40 and this says 50, do we have to move up to meet their standard, allow that, or do we enforce at 40?
So the definition of small wireless facility still uses the FCC's definition. So there, I guess I would note there's a slight difference between the definition and the regulation. So if someone came in and wanted to do an installation that was 60 feet tall or didn't meet those standards, it wouldn't be considered a small wireless facility anymore, and they wouldn't go through this. They'd have to go through other provisions. So this sets the standards for those that fall within those parameters.
So Councilor Peralta, if I can clarify a little bit, I think what you're referencing is the wireless facilities chapter that we have in our zoning ordinance. And the 40-foot limitation is for poles that are on private property. We have some language in that chapter relative to the public right-of-way. It's very limited. It was just a catch-all as we were waiting for this to come out of the FCC, and it really talks about the fact that technology in the public right-of-way on poles needed to be reviewed and approved by our 2 different entities, so the city as well as Mac Water and Light, and needed to be in a stealth position. We'll go back and continue to review that to make sure that there isn't any inconsistencies between that chapter and this new language that's in Chapter 3 of the code, but we did a quick review. We had 3 weeks, I think, to put this together and work with Mac Water and Light and legal counsel to get it to a place where we felt comfortable bringing it to you. But we did do a quick review of our existing language, and we feel that they're compatible.
Thank you.
This is a very controversial approach, having the FCC involved in regulating this. On a pole, the high-powered wires are at a certain level, and there's a thought that they might want to go above that for these high cell, and they don't have the equipment. The communication companies don't have the equipment, and nor would Mac Water and Light want them to be up in those very dangerous areas. And so this is a national debate that's going on right now. There's a pending bill in I think it's Congress right now that would back us away from this, but I don't think it's getting much traction. Adam?
Was there any testimony from any of the service providers, or is this just uniform across the nation, so they haven't really got involved with it?
In terms of service providers we talked with,
Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile.
Not specifically on this ordinance. Some of the McMinnville Water and Light staff attended some of the work sessions and sat down and met and talked about some of the things that were going on in some of the communities to develop
We have a cooperative approach with our telecommunications in Oregon. So, there's a real concern because we're doing it right in Oregon, but other states throughout the country don't have those cooperative agreements. And so, as you can tell on some of the poles, this equipment can be a small refrigerator. sitting on the pole, and they're not making sure that the pole structure is enough to handle that, plus the wires, plus high winds. And so this is, like I say, this is a very critical debate that's going on nationally right now. But in Oregon, we had this cooperative agreement with the telecom companies, and it's worked out very well for us. So we're opposed to a lot of the things that are happening nationally, but that discussion continues, and I don't know if that addresses.
I'll kind of raise another question. So do the PUDs feel that it could be a safety concern that some of these are going to be mounted up on these poles and they don't have the structure to?
That's part of the discussion, and at this particular time, we've got this cooperative agreement that we're going to be working on our poles. Okay, we've got the equipment and we have the knowledge of what you can and can't do.
So Mac Water and Light will be a stopgap that, in our instance, but maybe not for every PUD around the state.
And that's why it was so critical, but both of us had this this ordinance put on the books by April 15th, because after that you wouldn't have the opportunity to have it binding.
Okay. Thank you.
Again, correct anything.
No, that's great. There are a number of groups with the providers and municipalities working on model code language, and borrowed some of the work that's been done kind of around those best practices. I think our standards in McMinnville Water and Lights both address structural issues by making sure that poles are designed to carry that equipment.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments, questions? Seeing none, then I will ask for a motion to pass ordinance 5067 to a second reading.
So moved.
Second. It's been moved by Adam and seconded by Sal. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, signify by saying nay. Okay, so we will have Natalie do a second reading of ordinance number 5067 by ordinance title only.
This is the second reading of ordinance number 5067, an ordinance amending chapter 3.18 of the McMinnville City Code to add sections providing supplemental standards for small wireless facilities within the public right-of-way and declaring an emergency.
So I will ask for a motion to adopt ordinance number 5067.
So move. Oh, go ahead.
And a second? So, moved by Kelly, seconded by Sal. I'll call on city recorder to poll the council.
Counselor Drobkin?
Aye.
Counselor Garvin?
Aye.
Counselor Geary?
Aye.
Counselor Peralta? Aye. Counselor Stassens?
Aye.
Council President Minke?
Aye.
Ordinance number 5067 is adopted by a vote of 6-0. Thank you. This takes us to a number of resolutions this evening that we have before us. Our first consideration is for Resolution 2019-24, resolution amending the fee schedule to adopt fees for small wireless facilities within the public right-of-way. Tom, you indicated that you'll be presenting this, if you would.
Yes, I don't have much more to add. There's no separate presentation for that. The fee schedule that's proposed for this resolution, those are the fees that I presented in the earlier presentation. So I would establish the initial non-recurring fee for wireless applications consistent with the FCC presumptive fees. It would establish an annual recurring fee, again consistent with the FCC's presumptive fees, and then it would authorize the specific make-ready cost recovery should there be actual expenses that are incurred that we could bill for in those individual deployments. At this time, we're not proposing the higher fees, just we don't have a lot of experience on what the actual costs might be at this time, but that's something that could be revisited at a later date.
Thank you. Any discussions or question? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve resolution number 2019-24.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, so I've got Wendy with the motion and Adam with a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed signify by saying nay. This resolution, 2019-24, passes unanimously 6-0. This takes us to our second resolution this evening, which is 2019-21, a resolution awarding professional services agreement for ambulance and motor vehicle accident billing services. So Chief, if you would address us.
Mr. Mayor and councilors, we've been evaluating opportunities to try and improve our ambulance billing services for quite some time. Many organizations like ourselves who have used in-house billing services have transitioned to contracts for services with providers of these similar services. And as we're evaluating what our primary core services were to be consistent with the strategic plan, while fire and EMS is a core service of what we would like to continue to plan, maybe the ambulance billing service wasn't something we should be doing in-house. We should be looking at opportunities to improve it. Within the background information, there's some points pointed out on the opportunities for improvement to our services, to our citizens. And it's not for lack of effort by the employees that are currently working in these positions. It's because the corporations have so much more staffing available to double redundant backup billers and have secondary billers and customer service and QA and compliance officers. Through the process of requesting quotes, we've done our reference checks on the backside and found 10 of them at least within the Oregon that are working with this company currently. Salem is one of the more predominant ones who actually used to do ambulance billing services for other organizations in addition to the city of Salem, have transitioned to this company. We also did a site visit with Scott and Marcia and myself up to Paulsbo to visit the facility and ensure the company we would be potentially working with would meet the standards of the city of McMinnville and the citizens and the services that we would want to provide. As you look at the financials, that we received 3 quotes or three proposals. One was non-responsive. It did not speak to the motor vehicle accident, or something else it didn't speak to also, fire med assistance, nor the GEMT billing assistance. So it was specifically ambulance billing only. The other 2 systems design was met the proposal requirements and was the low bidder for the price of the process. The cost, the method that they propose is a per bill fee at $22 per bill. We have $113,000 based on our previous call volume for the year before as an estimate for what the extent of the contract. That cost is less than the cost of running the ambulance billing service in-house, as identified in the process. And currently, their collection rates overall for their Oregon and Washington and Alaska clients are at about 91% return, and I believe we're in the high 80s. So as we see currently, our recommendation would be to approve the resolution.
Okay. Any questions of the chief?
Chief, how does this affect your staffing in the department?
So currently, our Jenny, our ambulance billing screener, is doing everything that we need to do to get the bills sent to this company versus to the finance department. So the work is already being done from the fire department side. Just the software ports the ambulance bills to the company instead of across the street so there's no additional workload on, and there'll be no request for additional staffing, and it doesn't reduce our staffing. As far as the city, the fire department, it does reduce ambulance billing staffing in finance.
So it does reduce finance staff?
That's correct. That's correct. 1.75, two employees.
Other questions or discussion?
That's similar to the question that I had. So all of that current cost that you listed in here is cost that will go away when we switch over to this?
That's correct.
That's the net savings, the difference between those two savings to the department.
That's correct.
Is this transition being made a position that is going vacant, that's not going to be filled, or is it going to result in a layoff?
It'll result in layoffs.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your answer.
Layoffs.
Other questions? Discussion? If not, I will, go ahead. Adam?
So I guess with the council, or the strategic plan goal, city government capacity, so is there any capacity need in the finance department to repurpose that 1.75 FTE that we're eliminating by doing this? That might be more of a Marcia or Jeff question.
Go ahead, Marcia.
No, there really is not at this time. I did want to say that our HR manager, Kylie, is really actively working with these two employees. She has got them online. She's helping them work on their resumes. She's doing some coaching with them. So I feel that we're providing some really great resources to these two individuals who will need to be looking for employment other than in the finance department.
If I could follow up, the tentative timeframe for this, for their departure would be the end of June. So it's not a 2-week notice or something like that. So that will afford them some time to look for other opportunities. It also affords the city time to make the transition into the new billing cycle and also catch up on some of our AR that's outdated, and in addition, allow us to prepare for the GEMT billing that will be coming down the pipe relatively shortly. So the existing staff will continue working on those projects up until the end of June.
What's the cost savings on an annual basis? Sorry if it's in the report, I apologize.
And that's all right. I just have to, it's 169,000 for actual cost currently. It's 113,000 for the contract. And that's not counting the potential revenue increase by the percentage change.
Further questions? Hearing none, I will then ask for a motion to approve Resolution 2019-21.
So moved.
And a second. Remy moved and Adam seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Okay. This resolution passes unanimously, 5-2. This resolution passes 5-1, 5 in favor, 1 opposed. Our next resolution is Resolution 2019-22, a resolution awarding the contract for judiciary clarifiers and AD3 coding project number 2019-2. Mike, if you could update us.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'll refer you to the staff report that's in your packet from City Engineer Larry Sherwood, as well as copies of the bid results and the proposed resolution awarding the contract for the coatings of the the tertiary clarifiers and ATAD number 3 to Extreme Coatings, Inc. in the amount of $355,242. And so, unless there are any questions, staff would recommend you adopt the resolution as presented.
Discussion or questions for Mike?
I
Andy?
just have one. Mike, the difference between the long painting and the other two, just out of curiosity, do you have any idea why they were so much higher? $400,000 is a big delta.
I don't. We don't typically call the high bidder and ask why their prices were so high.
Is that normal, though, to see?
It does happen to time where you'll see on a project, there'll be, a group of bids that's close together and some that are just extremely high. And It could be that the contractor already has a pretty full schedule, and they'll throw a number at it. If they get the work, great. If not, they already have a pretty full schedule, so.
Just curious if that was typical or if that was...
It does happen, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion to approve Resolution 2019-22.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
It's approved by Zach and seconded by Wendy. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, please signify by saying nay. This Resolution 2019-22 passes unanimously 6-0. That takes us to Resolution 2019-23, a resolution adopting a supplemental budget for fiscal year 2018-2019 and making supplemental appropriations related to the general fund, Parks and Recreation Department, and donations to KOB program for sustainability assessment. And so we'll call on Marcia to address us on this. Marcia?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councilors. KOB Inc., which is a nonprofit board which supports the KOB program, did donate sufficient funds to pay for the sustainability assessment of KOB. Oregon After School for Kids, Oregon Ask, is the organization that did that assessment, and they presented their report to you on March 12th. So the donation by the KOB Inc. was $40,000, and that did cover the cost of the assessment. Local budget law allows us to do a supplemental budget when events that were not known at the time we adopted the budget occur. So this supplemental budget increases the donation revenue by $40,000 and increases the appropriation for professional services in the Park and Recreation Department KOB program budget. So our recommendation would be that the council adopt this resolution, adopting a supplemental budget and making supplemental appropriations.
Thank you, Marcia. And as all of you remember, Oregon Ask came to us and presented that assessment, and we had the reporting given to the council. Any questions for Marcia or discussion? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion to approve Resolution 2019-23.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Sal, seconded by Wendy. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please signify by saying nay. Resolution 2019-23 passes unanimously 6-0. Our last resolution this evening is 2019-25, a resolution awarding the contract for the purchase of a 2019 backhoe. Call on Mike to make a presentation to the council. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Again, I'll refer you to the brief staff report that's in your packet from Street Supervisor Dale Marshall, as well as a copy of the draft resolution that's before you this evening. The fiscal year 19 budget includes funds to replace our frontline backhoe, which is currently 20 years old, move it to a backup role, replacing a 35-year-old backhoe that's serving as our backup. Quotes were received from 3 vendors. Pape Machinery is the low bidder in the amount of $97,625.41. And so, unless there are any questions, staff would recommend you adopt the resolution as presented.
Thank you, Mike. Is this unit a gas or diesel unit?
Yes.
I asked that just because of the dirty diesel bill that's going through. It looks like that we may have to replace diesel up to a certain year. I know at Water and Light it is going to have it's a 10-year implementation, but it's really impacting us a bit. And so gas and diesel, I don't know. would be a question I would ask.
I'll follow up and let you know the particulars.
Okay.
on that.
I don't know if you've been keeping up on that, but you might reach out to Water and Light because of the impact that they have there on diesel, so. Any other questions?
What's the fate of the old backhoe?
1984 backhoe gets surplused and moved out of our fleet. So. And then the 20-year-old backhoe becomes the backup.
It's a diesel engine, Mayor.
Going to the farm? Where's it going?
No, the new backhoe has a diesel engine. I just looked up the specs on it.
Oh.
Other questions?
I want to see the mayor drive it when it comes in.
Yeah, let's have an obstacle course and a little training for council.
Know how to drive a backhoe.
Okay. I will ask for a motion to approve Resolution 2019-25.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Adam and seconded by Remy. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, signify by saying nay. Resolution 2019-25 passes unanimously 6-0. That takes us to the end of our regularly scheduled council meeting. We are going to meet in executive session under ORS 192-6602D to conduct deliberations with persons designed to carry out labor negotiations. So I will go ahead. We don't need to bring anything back.
We won't come back.
Okay, so I'll adjourn the meeting, and we'll move into